Hello, my name is Diane Ader, and my instructional design project is keyboarding skills for guitarists. It started as a one-day workshop. Now it is a 3-day workshop with skills covered each day. It's an event workshop. So Chordal keyboarding skills for guitarists is taught so that performers have options to create a fuller, more diverse sound in song accompaniment, as well as to create a rhythmic keyboard filler behind guitar solos. And so chords, chord inversions, scales, and chord progressions are an important part of this design project. Instruction is designed with the guitarist in mind, using chords that are already known to a guitarist. And this is the basis of learning fingering and hand positions needed to perform the chords on a keyboard. So this is an example of the tablature, the chord diagrams that guitarists are used to reading. So guitarists use chords and chord progressions as the basis for playing their music, and they change their strumming pattern based on the rhythm. So guitarists use these progressions, and progressions again are the order in which you play chords to create songs or to play existing songs. Adding a keyboard to the mix for a band broadens the sound and gives it a richer, more rhythmic filler under guitar solos. The keyboard has multiple ranges, 7 to be precise, with which to choose to play the chords, which also adds an overall aesthetics to the pieces performed. Understanding that guitarists are generally taught to play using diagrams and pictures other than standard music notation is important in the planning of this instruction. The use of keyboard diagrams has been integrated into the standard guitar music to meet the guitarists where they are comfortable and transfer their chord playing guitar knowledge to the keyboard. So one of the first things that they learn is the finger numbers, and in guitar your 4 fingers are numbered but your thumb is not. And so on the keyboard you're using your thumb as finger 1, and that's probably one of the biggest changes, because now you're, instead of counting up to 4, you're counting up to 5, and that thumb becomes an integral part of playing your chords. So we match up right hand and left hand, and they learn how their chords work. Chords can be played with fingers 1, 3, 5, 1, 2, 4, depending on the size hand of the person performing. So this is a 3-day live workshop with a facilitator. We use a series. It utilizes songs from pop, jazz, blues genres. The workshop combines aspects of multimedia, live instruction, sandbox, collaborative learning experience, and jam sessions. And I go into detail how that gets used, and I'll try to touch on that here in this recording, even though I know the recording has to be short. Participants will each have a keyboard on which to learn and practice their skills. The facilitator or instructor will be using projected slides, as well as a live streaming projection of his or her playing of the material. So the instructor, if it was me, I'd be modeling what the fingering looks like as you're playing the chords, and it would be projected, and that way it's as if they're sitting right next to me as we are going through the course. Participants will utilize their keyboard with the use of headsets so that their practice can be personally meaningful. The workshop will also use collaborative sessions where they can group and be able to practice together. That's a noisy part of the whole thing, but it becomes very important as we want musicians kind of live in a collaborative society, and so having those collaborative groups makes it an important part of their learning. There's also a studio band where the participants will take turns being the different members of the band. We also, I talked with my client, he also would like to train some of his students to be that studio band, to give them studio band experience and have them come and be there to be the studio band and do the things that we need the studio band. So that's one of the alterations that we're talking about in here to help the conference or workshop go smoothly. So that the audience that's targeted again is experienced guitar musicians. The skill levels we came up with were novice, beginner, intermediate, proficient, and experienced. And so the two groups that we would focus on and that we ran our testing with was the proficient and expert levels. And the feedback that we received back from them was they were very well taken. They liked the way it was approached and found success with it fairly quickly. So I wanted to show you how I approached the design and show you some of the samples of the work. The student manual was quite extensive, and everything that's projected on the board is also in the student manual, so that they don't actually have to look at the screen all the time. Some are going to prefer to look at the screen, others are going to want to focus on the book in front of them. So we talk about chords first. These are the major chords for a C scale, and this would be what a G scale looks like. And you'll notice back here on the C scale, when I put the hands in, this is where the live modeling would show them the fingering, and that goes a little bit easier. But for here, I wanted to be able to explain and show. So these, we'd practice the chords, then we would go and jump into a song. And we use folk songs to begin with because they use very few chords, and that helps us to master the chords and the transferring, the fingering between the chords. So this one uses the 4 chords that are shown here on the page in these diagrams. And what you see here is standard guitar music, how it's written for guitarists. And so this is something they're used to seeing. Some of them might even have these chord progressions memorized. Then all they have to worry about is what the fingering is that they are working on. So we learn this first in the key of C, then we learn it in the key of G, and you'll notice that we're still in the key of C. We used a G chord, we also used a C chord, but we used an F chord instead of the D chord that's used here. And so there's a little bit of alteration between them, but we're introducing new chords slowly, and then we can add and build on these chords, because now the songs can become more complex as you learn more chords and can do the transferrings. So these, so far, we've only talked about chords in root position. They're stacked really nice and neat, every other white key. But for smoother transition and playing of songs and nicer aesthetics, we want to be able to invert chords. So we teach in day 2, we start talking about inverted chords and larger chords that have 4 notes that are played at the same time, and the fingering involved with that. So here, the chord that you saw before for a C major had a big green dot here on C, and all we're doing is, instead of C being the lowest note that our fingers are playing, it's now the higher of the notes that we're playing, and we have an E and a G. This allows for us to be able to play chords that involve the same notes. For example, in the key of C and G, if I'm going from a C chord to a G chord, I am playing a G, but I have a B and a D in there instead. And so I can shift my fingers around and play an inversion, and it makes for smoother hand transitions. So we talk about chord inversions, we practice playing chord inversions, and then we throw them into songs and see how we can play them so that they're more smooth transitions. Also, so day 2 is taken up with playing the same songs we played on Monday, or on the first day, but this time, instead of jumping big jumps on the keyboard to play everything in root position, now we're in the chords to make for smoother transitions. Day 3, we talk about chord scales, and we'll actually introduce staffs at this point, just to help people start to recognize standard keyboard notation, standard music notation on staffs. That way, if they want to jump into playing other things, they can, because they'll be more familiar with it. But we talk about scales, and again, we use diagrams. So you see here we have, this is the right hand playing this, and we play 1, 2, 3, fingers 1, 2, 3. Our thumb crosses under, and then we do an order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When we come back down, though, we're going to be playing 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Our third finger crosses over, 3, 2, 1. Now, the reason I point that out is because the left hand does everything exactly opposite. So it does first, when we're going up a scale or ascending, we go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, third finger crosses over, and we do a 3, 2, 1 again. But going down, we start out 1, 2, 3, the thumb crosses under, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is our progress that we go through with our hands. So we take them through major scales, and then we do a little bit of, with canon in D, we take that and show how to do improvisation using the scales and scale tones, and that's a little bit of an exercise. Then we talk about chord progressions again, and a standard one used for 12-bar blues. 12-bar blues is essentially a 12-measure chord progression. Bars are equal to measures. They're the exact same thing. It's just two different ways of saying a spacing of music. So I've shown you here the 12 bars, bar lines here. And so we have 12 bars of music, and then it gets repeated at the end. But the important thing is the first four, let me get my pointer here. The first four is considered our one chord. And as we talk about scales, we talk about the Roman numerals that represent each scale letter. But in this, we take the Roman numerals that are in the standard 12-bar blues, which is 4 bars of a one tonic chord, 2 bars of a subdominant, back to the tonic chord, to the dominant, then our subdominant, back to our tonic chord. That doesn't mean a whole lot to most people. You can say 4 bars of a 1 chord, to 2 bars of 4 chord, back to the 1 chord, a 5 chord, a 4 chord, and a 1 chord again. But when you transfer those into actual alphabet letter chords, we see we're playing a C chord for 4 measures, 16 beats. Then we turn around and play an F chord for another 8 beats or 2 measures, C chord again for another 8 beats, a G chord, an F chord, and a C chord. All of a sudden, that is not such a hard thing to play because those are chords that we've all played already in this. It's just understanding how they work and how they work in each key. So once you learn this progression and can apply it in each key, then you can start to play it in any, you can play 12-bar blues in any key you want. Notice here in a G major scale, we're playing a G to C, back to G, then D, C, G. So I wanted you to be able to check out a little bit. 12-bar blues isn't quite as intimidating as what they might make it when you go and visit a college. So we teach them all these skills and chording, and it really just boils down to some very basic chords that they already know how to play on their guitar, but they're learning the fingering and the hand positions to be able to play it on a keyboard. So then we take songs that are more complicated, like Journey's Open Arms, and if you look it up online, they give you the lyrics with the chords above it, and now you have the chord progressions that we also add in. By this point, most people in this course, because again, they are advanced guitarists, they already know these chords and they've been playing them for 3 days, so they'll be able to walk through and play the verse. Now, the cool thing about pop songs is you get a chord progression and it repeats. They just change the words. And so you'll see here that we're going from this D. If you compare these two lines, they're exactly the same chord progression. So you're just repeating it. And then we have a little bit different here. And then we move on to our chorus. And the chorus, remember, that whole thing is going to get repeated again. But when we jump to verse 2, it's exactly the same chord progression or order of chords that we played for verse 1. And then we go back to our verse 2. So really, once you get it down, you have a great deal of fun to be able to play it. And that is the keyboarding skills for guitarists.